Behold, Bananas Ember, one of the finalists in my September 2019 Framework Battle Royale build competition. Since this loadout was not created by me, I've left some disclaimers in the description regarding that, and if you have no idea what all this is about, check out the playlist down there. Bananas Ember, so called for her ability to constantly and almost automatically trip enemies up, as though scattering bananas about the battlefield, is a very heavy crowd control build designed to not interrupt your murder spree. Amalgam Furax body count provides everything this loadout needs, including knockdowns and increased blast radius for the Ogress. Note that you'll want to select a secondary weapon to actually kill enemies at range. This loadout is meant to provide you with the tools you need to get some advantages out of Ember in general. Due to all the crowd control in this loadout, quick thinking is a lot better than it usually is. A lot of that crowd control is automatic, so when quick thinking saves you from death, it's kind of okay if it staggers you, since you probably won't get hit again right away. The enemy will probably get caught in some of your automatic rolling crowd control effects. To that end, Hunter Adrenaline is here to make sure you can keep World on Fire with Firequake on if you do get shot, so that the enemies do get automatically stunned most of the time. Otherwise, this is what you'd expect a Firequake build to be for the most part: range, a disregard for damage and therefore strength, and some efficiency. Steel Charge is here to help out the Furax, even though it's additive with pressure point, so it's not 60% total damage, it's more like a 25% total damage increase. That's still pretty reasonable. With my Forma spread, I can't max out Pain Threshold, which lessens the staggers from quick thinking, but obviously if you can max this here, you should. If you have Arcane Guardian, or perhaps even Arcane Tanker, I would recommend it because there are no real sources of damage reduction in this loadout besides a little bit of base armor from Ember and quick thinking's efficiency, so your effective health is quite low, although you don't need it to be too high since you have so much crowd control. It's just nice to have a safety net if you have it. We'll come back to Arcane Consequence, one of the funnier bits of tech this creator included. This Ogress isn't built for damage. Indeed, the Ogress isn't particularly impressive for its damage output anyway. It's designed to lock down faraway locations with Nightwatch Napalm, affecting a huge radius with Firestorm on top of the relevant ability from the Furax Amalgam mod. Consider Heavy Caliber. This will spread out the rockets and cover a larger total area with Napalm, but I'm going to specifically recommend building more Corrosive and not building on more Blast. This already has Blast innately, and Blast is good in this situation since enemies will be knocked over for ground finishers, and we'll get to that in a minute, but a single Blast proc on one enemy in a crowd will knock everyone down, so you don't really need more. And this build also loses almost no overall status output by dropping one dual stat elemental. With the base status of 35% and these 4, you have 98% status chance even without the multi-shot. Per trigger pull, you're almost guaranteed to get a status even if you take this off. So I'm going to recommend taking that off, leaving you with Corrosive, Blast, and Cold, and then skewing the damage even more toward Corrosive, like this, so that you do get those extra few procs. The Cold will make enemies get up slower when it procs, since it slows down their animations, and 1 or 2 Corrosive procs really will make a big difference against armored enemies. The Furax isn't really doing anything to get through the armor, and although it does often have enough damage, a little bit of an extra push, especially in the first few enemies, will make a big difference, as you shall see. Not a whole lot to say about the Furax Wraith here, other than that the Amalgam mod is a perfect fit. As enemies are knocked over and die to ground finishers, the Amalgam mod and Firequake will automatically knock down more enemies for more ground finishers, and fist weapons have very, very high ground finisher damage, so that's gonna combine with all of this other stuff to make it so you can actually kill the enemies, even though we're not really doing much about their armor. This loadout does have a variety of ways to add some status effects ahead of time for condition overload, and then since the Furax Wraith has atrocious status chance, the creator has gone for a very focused crit build with finishing touch. The Sentinel and weapon choice supplement the passive crowd control. Specific builds weren't included in this submission, so these builds are from me. DJINN with Fatal Attraction offers even more passive crowd control, and Fatal Attraction also procs Corrosive if enemies get too close, which is normally irrelevant, but here it happens to be good for condition overload. DJINN is also using the Cryatra, which in this case should probably be set to Blast. A lone Thermite rounds and Vial Acceleration would do the trick, but here's some other stuff that you can put on for more utility. More useful than usual to this loadout is Eagle Eye, which increases robotic weapon targeting distance, so the Sentinel will shoot at enemies further away, which is a little unintuitive. Most of our ways to knock enemies down in this loadout have limited range, so that's good. I also thought it might be useful to have NARAMON's combo counter decay to help us build a combo over a long period of time. It's a minor addition, but since we won't be hitting very many times at once, it might help us ramp up damage over time a little bit more. Right, so this might seem like a little bit of a weird package, but in practice, yeah, that's a lot of bananas. So you'll see our first few ground finishers kind of need some time to get going, but we're surviving just fine. We have plenty of time to get started, and once we stop getting knocked around a little bit, there we go, and now it begins. Bananas. More bananas. Bananas. And it just keeps going. So as you can see, enemies are pretty much incapable of attacking us. So even though we did get shot in the beginning there a little bit, we were able to survive. And now enemies are totally incapable of standing up. As soon as they stand up, they'll get knocked right back down by either the Amalgam Mods effect or by Firequake. Remember that since World on Fire gets lower range and higher cost and higher damage, but we don't care about that part, as it ramps up over time, you're going to want to refresh it every so often. So when you see it to get to 100%, maybe try to find a time to quickly turn it off and turn it back on. Yeah, Arcane Consequence. So it turns out, by headshot, you might be thinking shoot an enemy in the head. Turns out we're punching enemies in the head with this loadout, and that counts just fine. Arcane Consequence will be active most of the time without you looking for it. I tried, 5 or 10 times doing what I just did, and it was active most of the time. This is a really clever, interesting way to give you mobility so that you can use your knockdowns that move you from place to place. Oh, there's an announcement. Keep in mind that by the numbers, this loadout is rather squishy, but with all of this crowd control, it doesn't usually matter. In fact, since most mission environments are more enclosed than the Simulacrum, I've personally had a better experience outside of testing so far. It may be worth considering Corrosive Projection and then swapping the Ogress to Viral, or even more extreme takes on the melee build to give the Furax everything it needs to chain knockdowns. It does do quite a good job here, even with almost no help getting through that armor, but as you could see, the first few times that you do a ground finisher, it can be pretty inconsistent. Indeed, we're not helping it get through the armor very much, so it might be worth considering going a bit more extreme in the direction of helping it out with the armor initially. I do think Corrosive Projection might go a long way here. But do keep in mind that the Corrosive on the Ogress may help you get the ball rolling and alleviate this problem, so it's not a huge deal. There will be plenty of times when you get that initial Corrosive proc, and yeah, see there, we didn't really have very much startup time, so that was Bananas Ember. Thanks to the creator for submitting this, and for allowing me to make a video about it.